So in this video, let's look at the solutions to the taxes in the United States. So the first question asked, why might some people not pay income tax? Well, really, you're paying income tax. You're not paying income tax if you don't make enough money. There are certain cutoffs for that, and we also have the notion of disability if you're unemployed, or some of you mentioned taking money under the table by being paid cash and you don't report it. Those are all reasons people may not actually pay income tax. Now, there are other taxes within your income that you will always pay, including things like what's called FICA, which is your Social Security, your Medicare, and your Medicaid. That's charged to everybody, no matter what happens. Now, our system, and what I was asking about this is the fact that it's considered what's called a progressive tax rate. So like at certain amounts, and if you see number 3, at certain amounts of income, your tax rate goes up. The problem is that we also have a lot of different types of ways that we can do tax deductions that have been built into our code. So while we have these tax rates, they're not necessarily set in stone because of the tax deductions. So a lot of times you'll see different groups paying more than what it would be overall if it was just a straight up tax rate. Now when it came down to the anticipated amounts, I'm going to go through some of this, literally showing you what's going on here. I filled in some of this chart for you already, which was, I told you the percent of people for each of the categories, and right up here it did tell you that there was 150 million people, so you could use that to fill in that you get 1.5 million, 6 million, 7.5 million, all that already. Okay, so then the question came down to, how do I figure out income? Because I even told you the average income per person. So how did I get 2100 billion? So if I know that there are 1.5 million people, 1.5 million, that is 1 with a comma, and then millions is 6 zeros, but I have that 0.5, so I've got to put the 5 in the first place, and that's the 500,000. So it's 1,500,000. Now when I look at the next number, average income says 1,400,000. Well, if I think about my thousands means there's 3 zeros after it. So when I see 14, that's a comma, and I'm going to put TH for thousands. Well, if I put 3 zeros after that, that would give me 1,400,000. Now if I multiply 1,400,000 by 1,500,000, my calculator will shoot out 2.1 e to the 12. What this means is I have 2.1 times 10 to the 12th. What that number will look like is I'm going to move that decimal 12 times to the right. So it's 11 zeros. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I'm going to put my commas where the place value should be. Okay, so here's my hundreds, here's my thousands, here's my millions, here's my billions, and here's my trillions. So this is $2 100 billion that this group is making. Now the question though asks you to put it in the billions. When I look at the billions, I'm going to go to my billions place value. And whatever is from the billions place value to the left is the number of billions I have. I make that cutoff right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ignore everything to the right. And that tells me how many billions I have. So while I have $2.1 trillion in billions, that is $2,100 billion, which is why you see this written as 2,100. Now if I want to find my expected tax rate, I'm going to take my 2,100 billion and multiply it by 43%. And again, if I want to multiply by 43%, I'm going to take 2,100 times 0.43, 43%. And when I do that, I'm going to get $903 billion. Now, I can do that for each of these categories, and you've got to pay attention to those zeros and where your place values are, because that's what messed some of you up. And if I do that, I'm getting almost $3.1 trillion. That's what 3,859 billion tells me. It's about $3.1 trillion. Now when I go to my estimated, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I know my total number of working people, I know my income, and I know how much they should be making. These three columns here are all the same as my table above. I'm just multiplying by a new tax rate. So if you messed up your income, that's going to mess up your amount of taxes. And what I should get is that since these percents are lower, we're only taking in, and it's probably even less than that as an estimate, about $2.7 trillion. That means we're leaving $1.1 trillion out there in taxes due to deductions and loopholes and whatnot. And in 2012, if you looked it up and based it only on the 2012 federal deficit, which is what that question was asking, the 2012 deficit was $1.1 trillion. Well, that $1.1 trillion is coming from the tax deductions. So that may be something that we need to seriously consider as to what's going on with our deficit. Now I told you didn't have to do this last part, but let's look at it very quickly. When we look at the different parts, and we use this table up here, we know that in taxes, we've got these rows here, all the taxes. The 1% paid $504 billion, the 2 through 5 paid $576, 6 through 10 paid $422 billion, 11 through 20 paid $450 billion, and then the rest paid $800 billion in taxes. That's the other 80%, the lowest group. Now when I look at my distribution of wealth, and this is what I was just trying to have you examine. If I have 43% of the wealth, you'd probably expect that I should be paying 43% of the taxes, but that's not what's happening. The distribution of wealth is not directly related to the distribution of the taxes paid. The wealthiest percent, while they have 43%, is only paying 18% of the taxes. The next group with 30% is only paying 21% of the taxes. Whereas our bottom three groups, which combined only have 28% of the overall wealth in the U.S., pay over 50% of the taxes. And that's something that we have to consider as to what's going on with why people are struggling so much in this economy. It's because the people with the least amount of wealth are really providing the most amount of tax revenue for our system. And that's something we probably have to consider when we think about deductions.